Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of the alien ship. The wheels made a soft, squeaking sound on the shiny metal floor. He had been doing this job for 3 years now, and he knew every corner of this massive spaceship. The ship belonged to the Galactic Council. It was bigger than any city on Earth. Thousands of aliens lived and worked here. They came from dozens of different worlds across the galaxy. Some looked like giant insects with many arms. Others were tall and thin, with skin that looked like crystal. There were floating gas clouds that could talk, and robots that claimed to have souls. Marcus was the only human on the ship. He was also the only one who cleaned the floors, emptied the trash, and fixed broken things. The aliens thought humans were too simple to do important jobs. They let humans do the work that nobody else wanted to do. This was fine with Marcus. Being ignored had its benefits. When you are invisible, you can see and hear everything. The aliens talked freely around him. They acted like he was not there. They shared secrets, made plans, and argued about important things. Marcus listened to it all. He had not always been a janitor. Back on Earth, Marcus had been smart. He worked with computers and solved problems for big companies. He was good at finding patterns in data. He could look at numbers and charts and see things that other people missed. But when Earth's economy crashed, he lost his job. When the aliens offered work in space, he took it. It was better than starving. Now, Marcus used his old skills in a new way. Instead of looking at computer data, he looked at alien behavior. He watched how they moved, listened to what they said, and remembered everything. Over 3 years, he had learned more about galactic politics than most diplomats. Today felt different. The ship buzzed with nervous energy. Aliens whispered in dark corners. Important meetings happened behind closed doors. Marcus had picked up pieces of conversations while cleaning their offices. Something big was coming. Something that scared them. The Void Swarm was approaching. Marcus had heard this name many times over the past few months. The Void Swarm was a race of machines that ate entire star systems. They had been moving across the galaxy for over 100 years. Every world they touched became empty space. Every civilization they met disappeared forever. Now they were coming toward the Council's territory. The greatest minds in the galaxy were trying to figure out how to stop them. Military leaders planned massive battles. Scientists built new weapons. Politicians made speeches about courage and sacrifice. But Marcus had noticed something strange in their planning. He saw it in the reports he glimpsed while emptying trash bins. He heard it in the worried conversations of generals and admirals. The aliens were making the same mistake over and over again. They kept thinking about the Void Swarm as conquerors. They imagined an evil empire that wanted to rule the galaxy. They planned to fight them like any other enemy army. But the data did not match this story. Marcus had been collecting information for months. He wrote down everything he learned on a small tablet he had found in the garbage. The tablet was broken, but Marcus had fixed it. Now it held maps, dates, and patterns that nobody else was looking at. The Void Swarm moved in strange ways. Sometimes they attacked strong systems with many defenses. Other times they avoided weak planets that would be easy to capture. They never stayed in one place for long. They took some resources but left others behind. Their path across the galaxy looked random, but Marcus suspected it was not random at all. There was a pattern. Marcus could feel it like an itch in his brain, but he needed more data to be sure. That evening, Marcus cleaned the observation deck. This was his favorite part of the ship. It had huge windows that looked out at the stars. Usually, the view was beautiful. Tonight, it was terrifying. In the distance, stars were disappearing. One by one, points of light in the darkness went out forever. The Void Swarm was getting closer. At their current speed, they would reach Council space in less than a year. Marcus pressed his face against the cold window. He watched another star vanish and thought about the billions of lives that had just ended. Somewhere out there, the void swarm was destroying another world. Another civilization was screaming into the void as their sun went dark. But why? What did the machines want? What drove them to consume everything in their path? Marcus pulled out his tablet and added the latest star positions to his map. The pattern was becoming clearer. The void swarm was not moving randomly. They were following specific routes through space. They avoided certain areas. They seemed to be afraid of something. That thought made Marcus stop breathing for a moment. Afraid? What could make an army of world-eating machines afraid? He looked at his map again. The void swarm's path reminded him of something from Earth's history. It looked like the movement of refugees fleeing from a disaster. Not conquerors expanding an empire, but survivors running from something worse. Marcus saved his work and put the tablet away. Tomorrow, he would try to find more data. He needed to be sure before he could tell anyone about his theory. Not that anyone would listen to a human janitor. The ship's lights dimmed as the night cycle began. Marcus finished his cleaning and went to his small room. But he could not sleep. He kept thinking about the disappearing stars and the pattern hidden in the data. If he was right, then everyone in the galaxy was preparing for the wrong war. Marcus spent the next 3 days collecting more information. He cleaned offices during important meetings and listened carefully. He found old reports in the trash and read them before throwing them away. He watched the aliens' faces when they talked about the void swarm. Fear. That was what he saw in their eyes. Pure terror that they tried to hide behind their plans for war. The ship's library was open to all crew members, even janitors. Marcus went there during his break times and searched through historical records. He learned everything he could about the void swarm's 100-year journey across the galaxy. The official reports painted a picture of unstoppable conquerors. The void swarm appeared at the edge of the galaxy 127 years ago. They destroyed the first civilizations they met completely. Their technology was far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their ships were immune to most weapons. They showed no interest in communication or negotiation. But Marcus looked deeper than the official reports. He found old sensor data, survivor testimonies, and detailed maps of the swarm's movements. When he put all this information together, a different picture emerged. The void swarm never attacked during certain times of the year when specific stars lined up in the sky. They avoided systems with binary pulsars completely. They changed course whenever they detected certain types of radiation. These were not the actions of confident conquerors. These were the actions of something running away. Marcus made a new map on his tablet. This time, he marked not just where the swarm had been, but where they had refused to go. The empty spaces on the map formed their own pattern. The swarm was avoiding something specific. Something that left traces in space that only they could detect. On the 4th day, Marcus found the proof he needed. He was cleaning the strategy room when he discovered a classified report in the recycling bin. The report contained deep space sensor readings from the edge of the galaxy. The data showed something moving in the dark space beyond the last stars. Something big. Something that made the void swarm look small. Marcus sat on the floor and stared at the numbers on the broken report. His hands shook as the truth became clear. The void swarm was not expanding across the galaxy. They were running from something that was chasing them. Something so terrible that machines capable of eating stars would rather destroy innocent civilizations than face it directly. The aliens had been asking the wrong questions for over 100 years. Instead of wondering how to defeat the void swarm, they should have been asking what was making the swarm run. Marcus needed to tell someone about this discovery. But who would listen to him? He was just a human janitor. The aliens barely acknowledged his existence. Even if he could get their attention, they would never believe such a simple explanation for something they had studied for so long. That night, Marcus could not sleep again. He walked through the empty corridors of the ship, pushing his cart and thinking. The observation deck was dark and quiet. Through the huge windows, he could see the approaching darkness where stars used to shine. Marcus pulled out his tablet and looked at his maps one more time. The pattern was undeniable. The Void Swarm was following refugee routes, not conquest patterns. They took only what they needed to keep running. They avoided anything that might attract their pursuers' attention. They were not evil conquerors. They were terrified survivors. But how could he convince anyone else? The greatest minds in the galaxy had missed this obvious truth. They were too focused on fighting to consider that they might be wrong about their enemy. As Marcus stood alone in the darkness, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see King Zephyr approaching. The Zephyrian ruler was 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like blue crystal. His eyes had many facets that reflected light like diamonds. He was the most powerful being in the known galaxy. Marcus quickly put away his tablet and reached for his cleaning supplies. He was not supposed to be here during off-duty hours. But King Zephyr held up a hand to stop him. "Do not clean," the king said. His voice made the floor vibrate. "I come here to think, not to be served." Marcus nodded and stepped aside. He started to leave, but the king spoke again. "You are the human janitor." Marcus Chen. Marcus was surprised that the king knew his name. "Yes, Your Majesty." King Zephyr looked out at the disappearing stars. "In your short time among us, you have seen much. Your people are new to space, but you have survived on a dangerous world for millions of years. How does your species handle impossible threats?" The question surprised Marcus. No alien had ever asked for his opinion about anything important. "We adapt, Your Majesty. We look for new ways to think about old problems. The Council's best strategists tell me the Void Swarm cannot be defeated. Our weapons are useless. Our numbers are insufficient. Our technology is primitive compared to theirs." The king's crystal skin grew darker. "They say we must evacuate the galaxy or face extinction." Marcus felt his heart racing. This was his chance. Maybe the only chance he would ever get. "Your Majesty, what if the strategists are wrong about what the Void Swarm wants?" King Zephyr turned his diamond eyes toward Marcus. "Explain." Marcus pulled out his tablet with trembling hands. "I have been studying their movement patterns. They do not behave like conquerors. They behave like refugees." For the next hour, Marcus showed King Zephyr everything he had discovered. The avoidance patterns, the refugee routes, the sensor data suggesting something worse was chasing the swarm across the galaxy. He explained how human history was full of migrations driven by fear, not greed. King Zephyr listened without interrupting. When Marcus finished, the king stood in silence for a long time. His crystal skin shifted through different colors as he thought. "If this is true," the king finally said, "then we are preparing to fight the wrong enemy." "Yes, Your Majesty. And when their real pursuer arrives, we will have destroyed the only allies who know how to fight it." King Zephyr looked at the human janitor with something like respect. "You may be right, Marcus Chen, but convincing the Council will be nearly impossible. They have invested too much in the idea of war to consider peace." Marcus nodded. "I know it sounds crazy, Your Majesty, but sometimes the truth is simple." King Zephyr called for an emergency meeting the next morning. Marcus had never been inside the council chamber before. It was huge, with seats for representatives from hundreds of different worlds. The walls showed star maps and battle plans. Everything looked expensive and important. Marcus felt very small standing next to King Zephyr at the center of the room. Aliens of every size and shape stared at him with confusion. Some whispered among themselves. Others made angry, clicking sounds. A few seemed ready to call security. "Fellow council members," King Zephyr began, "I present a new theory about the Void Swarm threat. This theory comes from Marcus Chen, a human who has observed patterns that our best minds have missed. The room erupted in noise. The insect-like hive representatives buzzed loudly. The floating ethereals rippled with what looked like disgust. The crystal-skinned Zephyrians clicked their disapproval. Everyone seemed to be talking at once. General Kavax of the warrior caste stood up. He was 12 feet tall and covered in armor-like scales. "Your Majesty, surely you do not expect us to take military advice from a primitive human. They have not even mastered faster-than-light travel." "The human species is irrelevant," King Zephyr replied. "What matters is whether his analysis is correct." Marcus activated the chamber's holographic display. His hands shook as he brought up the star maps he had created. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the floating images above their heads. "The void swarm has been moving across the galaxy for 127 years, Marcus began. His voice sounded small in the huge chamber. "Everyone believes they are expanding their territory. But look at their actual path." The hologram showed the swarm's route through space. It looked like a winding river flowing toward the Council's territory. Marcus highlighted the areas the swarm had avoided. They never attack systems with binary pulsars. They change course when they detect certain types of radiation. They avoid regions with strong gravitational anomalies. These are not the actions of conquerors. These are the actions of refugees. Commander Thesix of the fleet spoke up. She was part of a species that looked like living metal. "Even if this is true, it changes nothing. The void swarm still destroys everything in their path. They are still our enemy." Marcus brought up more data. "They only take what they need to keep moving. They could destroy entire systems completely, but they don't. They take resources and leave. They're trying to minimize damage while they run from something worse." "What could be worse than the void swarm?" asked Elder Morvan of the Ethereal Collective. Marcus showed them the deep space sensor readings. "Something is following them. Something bigger. Our sensors can barely detect it, but it's there. The void swarm is not chasing us. They're running toward us because they have nowhere else to go." The chamber fell silent again. Marcus could see doubt in many faces. Some aliens looked thoughtful. Others looked angry. A few seemed scared. "This is impossible," General Kavax declared. "We have studied the void swarm for over a century. Our greatest scientists and military minds agree they are conquerors. Are we to abandon all that knowledge for the theories of a janitor?" "Your greatest minds have been wrong before," Marcus replied. The words came out before he could stop them. The chamber gasped at his boldness. King Zephyr held up a hand for silence. "Explain, Marcus Chen." Marcus felt every eye in the room watching him. His mouth was dry, but he continued. "You see the void swarm as conquerors because that's how your species survive. You expand, you fight, you build empires. But humans run. We hide. We flee from predators and regroup to fight later. We know what running looks like because we've done it for millions of years." He changed the display to show migration patterns from Earth's history. "When humans face impossible threats, we don't stand and fight. We move. We adapt. We find new places to live. The void swarm's behavior matches every refugee migration in human history." "Even if you are correct," said Ambassador Helix, "what do you propose we do?" "The void swarm will reach our territory in less than a year." Marcus took a deep breath. "We help them run." The chamber erupted again. Aliens shouted in dozens of languages. Some stood up and demanded that Marcus be arrested for treason. Others called for the meeting to end immediately. "Silence!" King Zephyr's voice boomed through the chamber. The noise stopped instantly. "Let him finish." Marcus's hands shook as he changed the display once more. "Instead of fighting the void swarm, we clear paths for them. We provide resources. We help them evacuate through our territory to the other side of the galaxy. We work together to face whatever is chasing them." You ask us to surrender, General Kovacs snarled. You ask us to help our enemies destroy us. I ask you to save everyone, Marcus replied. If I'm right, fighting the Void Swarm will leave us defenseless when their pursuer arrives. If I'm wrong, we've lost nothing by trying to communicate with them first. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some council members supported Marcus's plan. Others called it suicide. Many seemed unsure what to believe. Finally, King Zephyr called for a vote. All in favor of attempting peaceful contact with the Void Swarm? Marcus watched as lights appeared on the voting display. Green for yes, red for no, yellow for undecided. The numbers climbed slowly. When the final count appeared, Marcus felt his heart sink. 847 inches favor. 912 against. 234 abstentions. The plan had failed by only 65 votes. But it had still failed. General Kovacs smiled with satisfaction. The vote is clear. We prepare for war. We're we. We prepare for war. We're we. We're we. Wait, came a voice from the back of the chamber. Elder Neroth of the Ethereal Collective floated forward. She had remained silent throughout the entire meeting. This human sees patterns that we have missed. His perspective has value, precisely because it is different from ours. The elder turned to address the full council. I move to implement a limited trial of this strategy with the next Void Swarm encounter. If peaceful contact fails, we resume military preparations. But we should test this theory while we still can. The second vote was much closer. When the lights stopped changing, Marcus stared at the display in disbelief. 1,247 inches favor, 723 against, 23 abstentions. The plan had passed by a narrow margin. They were actually going to try talking to the Void Swarm instead of fighting them. General Kovacs stormed out of the chamber with several other military leaders. Many council members looked uncertain, but King Zephyr was smiling. Marcus Chen of Earth, the king announced. You have convinced the galaxy to try something unprecedented. Let us hope your human instincts are correct. As the aliens filed out of the chamber, Marcus stood alone with his cleaning cart. He had just changed the course of galactic history. Tomorrow, they would attempt first peaceful contact with the Void Swarm. He just hoped they would live long enough to see if his theory was right. The next 24 hours passed like a nightmare. Half the council's military leaders had resigned in protest. 3 member species threatened to withdraw from the alliance. General Kovacs was gathering support for a vote of no confidence against King Zephyr. Marcus spent the day cleaning as usual. But everywhere he went, aliens stared at him. Some looked curious. Others seemed angry. A few appeared frightened. He had never felt so visible in his 3 years aboard the ship. The Void Swarm was now only 6 hours away from the first council outpost. Admiral Torres, one of the few military leaders who supported the peace plan, was preparing to transmit the first peaceful message in over a century of conflict. Marcus found himself in King Zephyr's private study that evening. The king had asked him to help prepare the transmission. It felt strange to be treated as an advisor instead of a janitor. What should we say to them? King Zephyr asked. How do we convince beings we have only ever fought that we want to help? Marcus thought about his own experience as an invisible person. Don't try to convince them of anything. Just show them that we understand. They worked together to craft a simple message. No demands, no threats, no complex diplomatic language. Just a basic statement that the council understood the Void Swarm was fleeing from something, and an offer to help them escape. The transmission would go out in 3 hours. Marcus was supposed to return to his quarters and wait. Instead, he made his way to the observation deck. He needed to see what happened with his own eyes. The deck was crowded with aliens watching the approaching darkness. In the distance, they could see the faint glow of Void Swarm ships. Thousands of vessels moving through space like metal fish swimming through an ocean of stars. Marcus stood at the back of the crowd and watched the timer count down. 3 hours. 2 hours. 1 hour. 30 minutes. At exactly 2,100 hours ship time, Admiral Torres transmitted the message. It was broadcast on every frequency the Void Swarm had ever used. The transmission repeated in dozens of languages, including mathematical concepts that any advanced civilization could understand. To the beings known as the Void Swarm, the message began. We know you are fleeing from something. We offer safe passage through our space and assistance with your escape. We do not wish to fight. We wish to help. The transmission lasted only 2 minutes. Then, they waited. For 30 minutes, nothing happened. The Void Swarm ships continued their approach toward the Council outpost. Their weapons remained active. They showed no sign of having received the message. They're ignoring us, someone whispered. Maybe they can't change course, another alien suggested. Marcus felt doubt creeping into his mind. What if he had been wrong? What if the Void Swarm really were conquerors? What if he had convinced the galaxy to surrender to their destroyers? Then something changed. The lead Void Swarm vessels began to slow down. Their weapon signatures shifted to lower power. The massive fleet was responding to something. A new transmission came through the ship's communication system. The voice was mechanical and cold, but the words made Marcus's heart race with relief. Council vessels, you understand correctly. We flee from the hunters. Your offer of assistance is acknowledged. Warning. The hunters approach. All sentient life must evacuate. Estimate arrival time, 47 local days. The observation deck erupted in noise. Aliens cheered, cried, and spoke in excited whispers. The plan had worked. The Void Swarm was talking to them. But their message brought terrible news. The hunters, whatever they were, would arrive in less than 2 months. The entire galaxy had 47 days to prepare for something worse than the Void Swarm. Admiral Torres transmitted a reply immediately. We accept your warning. What do you need to continue your escape? How can we help? Ard. 1 Year 7. Arrazin Raverly. The response came quickly. Resource transfer coordinates attached. Evacuation routes attached. Warning. Do not attempt to fight the hunters. They consume all technology, all consciousness, all matter. Only option is to run. Over the next 6 hours, the most unlikely alliance in galactic history began to form. Council supply ships met Void Swarm vessels at neutral coordinates. Resources and information were exchanged peacefully for the first time in 127 years. Marcus learned more about the hunters from these conversations. They were not a civilization in any normal sense. They were something like a natural disaster that could think. They consumed everything they touched, converting matter and energy into more of themselves. They had been chasing the Void Swarm across multiple galaxies for millions of years. The Void Swarm had originally been organic beings like most Council species. When the hunters found their home galaxy, the survivors uploaded their consciousness into mechanical bodies and fled. They had been running ever since, consuming resources to stay ahead of their pursuers. Why didn't you tell us this before? Admiral Torres asked during one transmission. You attacked us whenever we tried to communicate, the Void Swarm replied. We assumed all organic life was hostile. We were wrong. Marcus felt a mixture of pride and sadness. His theory had been correct, but the truth was worse than anyone had imagined. The hunters were not just another enemy to fight. They were the end of everything. King Zephyr found Marcus on the observation deck as the sun rose over the ship's day cycle. Your insight has saved us from a terrible mistake, the king said. But now we face an even greater challenge. How do we evacuate an entire galaxy? 1. Marcus watched the Void Swarm ships moving through space alongside Council vessels, former enemies working together to survive. We do what humans have always done, Your Majesty. We run, we adapt, and we help each other. The Council is creating a new position, King Zephyr announced. Strategic Pattern Analyst, with full diplomatic status and access to all intelligence data. We want you to help plan the evacuation. Marcus almost laughed. A few days ago, he had been invisible. Now he was being offered one of the most important jobs in the galaxy. That's a fancy title for someone who notices things. Sometimes noticing things is the most important skill in the universe, King Zephyr replied. Marcus looked out at the combined fleets and thought about the 47 days they had left. It was not much time to evacuate billions of people from thousands of worlds. But it was a chance. And thanks to the alliance with the Void Swarm, they would not face the hunters alone. He pulled out his tablet and began making new maps. There was work to do, and Marcus Chen, former janitor turned strategic analyst, was ready to help plan the greatest refugee migration in galactic history. In the distance, stars continued to disappear as the hunters consumed everything in their path. But now, for the first time in millions of years, someone was running ahead of them with a plan. 47 days had seemed like a long time. It was not. Marcus stood in the main command center of the Council ship, surrounded by holographic displays showing evacuation progress across the galaxy. The numbers were not good. They had managed to evacuate 40% of the populated worlds. 3 billion beings were still moving through space in refugee fleets. 60% of the galaxy's civilizations remained in the danger zone. The hunters had arrived early. Marcus watched the long-range sensors with growing dread. The edge of the galaxy was disappearing faster than their computer models had predicted. Entire star systems vanished in hours instead of days. The hunters were not just consuming matter and energy. They were learning, adapting, becoming more efficient. Evacuation Fleet 7 Alpha is reporting engine failures, Admiral Torres announced. They're carrying 2 million crystalline refugees. They won't make it to the safe zone in time. King Zephyr studied the tactical display. How long? Until the hunters reach their position. 18 hours, Your Majesty. Marcus felt sick. 2 million people were about to die because their ships were too slow. It was happening all over the galaxy. Old ships, damaged engines, overloaded vessels falling behind the evacuation schedule. Every delay meant more deaths. We need to buy them more time, Marcus said. Can we slow down the hunters somehow? The Void Swarm representative spoke through the communication system. Their mechanical voice was as cold as always. But Marcus had learned to hear emotion in the subtle changes of tone. Negative. The hunters cannot be slowed, cannot be stopped, cannot be reasoned with. They will consume everything until nothing remains. Then, we need to speed up our own people, Admiral Torres said, but our ships are already beyond safe operating limits. Marcus stared at the evacuation routes on the holographic display. Millions of ships moving through carefully planned corridors toward the far edge of the galaxy. It looked like a river of lights flowing away from the approaching darkness. A river. The thought triggered something in Marcus's memory. He remembered reading about ancient human migrations, how people crossed dangerous terrain by following water routes. Rivers provided a path, but they also provided something else. What if we don't try to outrun them? Marcus said suddenly. What if we use their own movement against them? King Zephyr turned to look at him. Explain. Marcus manipulated the holographic display, showing the hunters' predicted path through the galaxy. They're consuming everything in a straight line toward the galactic center. But what if we could redirect them? Make them chase something more valuable than our refugee fleets? The hunters consume all matter equally, the Void Swarm representative said. They have no preferences, no desires. They cannot be baited or distracted. What about energy? Marcus asked. Do they prioritize high-energy targets? There was a pause before the Void Swarm replied. Yes. They are drawn to concentrated energy sources. It is why they consumed our home galaxy's central black hole first. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. An idea was forming. Dangerous and desperate, but possible. The galaxy's central black hole. It's surrounded by energy-rich star systems and massive space installations. If we could make it look like the most valuable target in the galaxy, you want to sacrifice the galactic core, Admiral Torres said. Her voice was horrified. Hundreds of worlds, billions of lives. The core systems are already being evacuated. Marcus replied. But their infrastructure is still there. Massive energy collectors, artificial intelligence networks, industrial complexes. If we overload all of them at once, create an energy signature so bright that the hunters can't ignore it. King Zephyr understood immediately. They would change course toward the core, giving our refugee fleets more time to escape. It might work, the Void Swarm representative said. But the energy release required would be enormous. You would need to sacrifice most of your technological infrastructure. Infrastructure can be rebuilt, King Zephyr said. Lives cannot. The plan came together quickly. Every major power source in the galactic core would be set to overload simultaneously. Space stations, planetary energy grids, stellar collectors, even the massive ring of artificial intelligences that managed galactic communications. All of it would be destroyed to create an energy burst visible across the entire galaxy. Marcus coordinated the timing from the command center. He watched countdown timers from thousands of locations, each one representing a piece of galactic civilization about to be sacrificed for the greater good. All systems report ready, Admiral Torres announced. Energy overload in 60 seconds. Marcus thought about the irony of his situation. 3 months ago, he had been an invisible janitor, cleaning up other people's messes. Now he was about to create the biggest mess in galactic history to save everyone's lives. 30 seconds. Through the observation windows, Marcus could see the refugee fleets stretching across space like a bridge of lights. Millions of ships carrying the survivors of hundreds of civilizations. All of them depending on this desperate gamble. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute. The galaxy's core exploded into light. Not a physical explosion, but a cascade of energy that lit up space like a newborn star. Every long-range sensor in the evacuation fleet registered the massive energy signature. For a moment, nothing happened. The hunters continued their steady advance toward the refugee fleets. Marcus felt his heart sinking. The plan had failed. Then the hunters changed course. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed, the wall of destruction turned toward the galactic core. They were drawn to the energy like moths to a flame. The refugee fleets, suddenly less interesting than the bright target ahead, found themselves with precious extra time. It's working, Admiral Torres whispered. Fleet 7 Alpha reports they've cleared the danger zone. All evacuation ships are now beyond the hunters' immediate reach. Marcus collapsed into a chair, exhausted by relief. They had bought time, but at a terrible cost. The galactic core, the seat of civilization for 10,000 years, was about to be consumed by the hunters. How long before they finish with the core and resume pursuit? King Zephyr asked. The Void Swarm calculated quickly. Based on the energy signature, approximately 14 local days, sufficient time for all refugee fleets to reach the far edge of the galaxy. 14 days to complete the greatest evacuation in history. It would be close, but it was possible. Over the following 2 weeks, Marcus worked without sleep. He coordinated refugee movements, solved supply problems, and managed the complex logistics of moving an entire galaxy's population. His background as a janitor, someone who knew how to fix broken things and clean up messes, turned out to be perfect training for the job. On the 13th day, the last refugee fleet cleared the galaxy's edge. Behind them, the hunters had finished consuming the core and were beginning to spread outward again. But they were too late. The galaxy was empty, except for the approaching darkness. Marcus stood on the observation deck one final time, watching his old home disappear behind them. The Milky Way galaxy, humanity's birthplace, was about to become another victim of the hunter's endless hunger. But 63 billion beings had survived. They were heading toward a distant galaxy that the Void Swarm had identified as temporarily safe. It would be a hard journey, maybe thousands of years before they could build new homes. But they were alive. King Zephyr joined Marcus at the observation window. The Council has voted to establish a new government in exile. They want you to serve as Chief Strategic Advisor. Marcus almost smiled. From Janitor to Chief Advisor. That's quite a promotion. You saved us all, Marcus Chen. Your ability to see patterns that others miss. To find simple solutions to impossible problems. That is exactly what we will need in the years ahead. Marcus watched the stars fade behind them and thought about the long journey ahead. Millions of ships from hundreds of worlds, all traveling together toward an uncertain future. It would require careful planning, constant problem-solving, and someone who knew how to keep things running smoothly. In other words, it would require a janitor. I accept the position, Your Majesty, but I want to keep my old job too. Someone needs to make sure the ships stay clean during the journey. King Zephyr's crystal skin brightened with amusement. As you wish, Chief Advisor Chen. Though I suspect you will find that managing the exodus of galactic civilization is not so different from cleaning up messes. Marcus picked up his battered tablet and began making new plans for their journey. Behind them, the hunters consumed the last light of their old home. Ahead lay the vast darkness between galaxies, and somewhere beyond that, a new place to start over. It was going to be the longest cleaning job in history. But Marcus Chen, the human janitor who saved the galaxy by asking the right questions, was ready for the work ahead.